Welcome in, Niners faithful. It is time for the bye week, which means we have to come up with some bye week programming here. Obviously, no game preview to go over this week, and everyone's going to pick apart the quarterback competition anyway on other YouTube channels. So we're going to grade each position group, including the coaching staff, heading into week 7 against the Colts. So obviously, we got to start from the head of the snake, the quarterback position. So simple letter grades, nothing too big. Jose, you go first on this one. Where are you thinking for the quarterback position? Where are we giving this grade?
I'm going to put it right down the middle, just give it a C. It's been pretty average at best, I believe. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo has showed some pretty good. He's shown what we've seen from him in the past, right? Where he's given us a chance to win. We saw that definitely in the first 2 games. The third game, he definitely gave us a chance to win by giving us a lead with 37 seconds left. Our defense just couldn't take care of business. Now you do have the issue that you have to throw in Trey Lance, probably one of the most raw players to get into the league this year. He unfortunately had to start against the NFL's last remaining undefeated team. Before that, his last start in any football game was January 11th of 2020. So obviously, we know how that went, and we saw what he was able to do. If it was just a Trey Lance grade, it would probably be a D. But I think Jimmy Garoppolo has done enough to bump that grade up to a C, I believe.
I think I'm going to agree with you here. C, I think, is an accurate call. I was tempted to go a little bit C minus too when I factor in stuff like the injuries, which another injury for Jimmy Garoppolo. Trey Lance actually battling a knee sprain too, as I should add. And then both quarterbacks have had their moments in which they've looked bad, especially in the first half of games. I think that is one of the biggest indictments on this quarterback position to this point. But we have seen some bright spots, whether it be from Lance. We did see some moments in the Cardinals game in which he looked okay. And then Jimmy, he's had his general Jimmy Garoppolo-ness, when you talk about the comeback drive against the Packers, but you also mix that with the fumble on the Packers game as well. It's always that hit or miss right down the middle, but with the injuries and everything, it's just a C is about the only thing I feel like you can really give the quarterback position for the Niners right now at this time. Let's stay in the backfield. Let's talk about the running backs next. So Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, we saw a little Jermichael Hasty for a bit there. Jeff Wilson's been on PUP all this year. I'm going to give this one a D+. Because I look at this team and I don't think they've got a passing grade because we haven't had a signature running performance outside of the Detroit game. Obviously, Elijah Mitchell's battled the shoulder injury all year. Trey Sermon has looked not great in relief. And then Jermichael Hasty goes down almost immediately too with an ankle injury. So when you look at this group as a whole, it's hard to say that they get a passing grade. This has not looked like a traditional Shanahan running game. And I think that's the key to unlocking the Niners offense as a whole. And when they're bad, I think it's a little bit more noticeable. And that's why the offense has been bad. So D+ for the running back. Jose, where are you on this one?
I'm actually going to go just straight D. I'm not even going to give him the D+. You mentioned it. Obviously, injuries is a huge cause of concern at this position. We saw Raheem Mostert go down, which is definitely not what we wanted, not the start that we wanted. But even Elijah Mitchell, he showed a lot of promise in his first game. But even he went down in week 2 against Philadelphia. All three of our running backs who were 1, 2, and 3 in the depth chart at the running back position, all 3 of them got hurt in that same game. So, staying healthy is part of performing in the NFL. And if you're not staying healthy and you're not on the football field, it's hard for me to give you a passing grade. So I'm going to go with the D.
Okay. Other skill position players. Let's talk about wide receiver. Now, wide receiver, I want to elevate this one. I'm going to give you the grading system first here. I wanted to give it a little bit better because of Debo, but it's been a rough group so far this year. Jose, grade on the wide receivers.
And you know what? Debo's been so great that I want to give this receiving core a B. Debo Samuel, he's currently right now 2nd in the league in receiving yards. And even guys like Trent Sherfield, he played pretty well week 1. Brandon Nayuk is finally starting to see a little bit more play calls thrown his way. And that's exactly what we need, right? We kind of need a dynamic where we see Brandon Nayuk and Debo Samuel almost sharing possessions. Obviously, at this point, Debo Samuel is going to be the number 1 target for whichever quarterback is on the field. And with his performances alone that we've seen, the numbers that he's been able to put up, I'm willing to say this is a B position, I'll give them the letter grade B. Obviously, we need Brandon Ayuk to wake up a little bit, kind of let him. I think the best solution for him is to just give him the ball, even if you're not throwing him the ball. If you need to give him a couple of end arounds, something to just give the guy the ball to get his confidence going. And I think you're going to see the team benefit, especially the offense, benefit from him getting the ball a little bit more. But Deebo Samuel has done such a phenomenal job this season so far that I'm willing to give them a B for that.
I think I'm very divided on you here. I'm going to give this one, just because Deebo is a top 5 receiver in receiving yards, I'm going to say C minus. I just have not seen anyone else have a game in which they just take over for the wide receiving group. Brandon Ayuk this week, in fact, the comments from John Lynch, he hasn't made the strides we expect him to. Those weigh heavy on him. So what strides am I still not seeing from Brandon Ayuk at this point? Why is he not more involved in the game plan? There's a lot of questions I feel are unanswered. We thought this means guys like Trent Sherfield was stepped up. Trent Sherfield's only had 2 catches maximum per game. Travis Benjamin shouldn't even be on the field. You talk about Jawan Jennings, Jennings, I haven't seen him since week 1 where he caught the touchdown. So everyone outside of Deebo has just been non-existent. And it's hard for me to rate this group higher. I wanted to go D, but I'm slightly elevating just because Deebo is having such an amazing year, but he can't do it all on his own. And I'm worried still to this point because Deebo is obviously a guy that's battled injuries in the past. If he goes down or anything happens, he has to miss any length of time, who is going to step up? Because someone has to be that sacking guy. It can't just be on one guy to elevate an entire position group that relies on a rotation of 6 to 7 guys. That's my biggest problem with the wide receivers to this point. Let's move on. Tight end. This is a tough one to rate as well. I hate to do this. I'm going to give them a D+ because George Kittle, even in the games he played, I just didn't really feel his presence as much. There was one George Kittle game, and I know fantasy football owners, in fact, would relate to this, that you felt George Kittle was really relevant. And besides him, Ross Dwelly, he did catch a touchdown early in this year. But I just have not felt the tight end position really. And you would think that more pressure would be put on the tight ends to elevate the passing attack, given that the wide receiving group, like I said, has been subpar to this point. And yet, even then, we haven't seen as dynamic of usage of them. I haven't seen George Kittle break loose on one play action this year, and now he's going to miss multiple weeks. So who knows how good he's going to be when he comes back. Dwelly's good, but he's not good enough. And Charlie Werner, I don't think that he can step up much more than a blocking tight end at this point. So this tight end group, they're not passing grade for me. They're not passing as a group. Now, this letter grade can always change by the end of the season, but it really depends because I need George Kittle to come back healthy and playing like a top 3 tight end in the league, because at this point, top 10 is about where he's at.
No, definitely. I'm in agreement here with you. D+ is as high as I'm willing to go. It's been kind of disappointing to see him go down to another injury. By him, I mean George Kittle. Obviously, we paid him a bunch of money to be one of the best tight ends in the entire league, if not the best tight end. I mean, he is the highest paid tight end ever. So we kind of expect him to put up a little bit more of the numbers, and he can't do that if the guy's just unhealthy. And if he's not on the football field, then we're going to have to rely on guys like Ross Dwelly. You said he scored against Seattle, but other than that, the guy's been kind of, non-existent when it comes to the passing game. And that just adds to the mountain of problems that this offense has. If your tight end position is not creating any chances for you in the passing game, you're just asking a lot of the quarterback and the wide receivers to, produce on the offensive side. So yeah, D+ for me. We really need George Kittle to come back. And when he does come back, he needs to be healthy for the remainder of the season. And if not, then it's going to be a tough going for this offense.
Okay. It's time to go into the trenches. Let's talk about that offensive line a little. So Trent Williams has provided us the most highlight reels I think I've seen for a left tackle in my lifetime. But beyond that, the rest of the offensive line is mediocre at best. I mean, Alex Mack, we expected a little bit more coming out of signing him. Did have that botched snap to open up the season between him and Jimmy. So not exactly gained the season off to a thrilling start there, though I have seen him contribute on some great pulls, some end around. So it's good that we have some mobile offensive linemen. I went first on tight ends. Jose, where are you on this group?
I'm going to give it a C because you mentioned it. Other than Trent Williams, I mean, let's talk about this a little bit. If we didn't trade for Trent Williams last season, and if we didn't sign him during the offseason, this offensive line would be in shambles because he's really the only, high tier guy that this offensive line has. So I'm going to go, like around a C, mainly because of Trent Williams. I can't rate him any higher because the rest of the offensive line, they just, I don't know what it is, but any defensive line could just go through the opposite side, go through that right tackle side, and boom, you get to Jimmy Garoppolo pretty easily. And we've seen that even with a defensive like Green Bay, who isn't really known, or even this year, it doesn't really get pressure on the quarterback that much. Jimmy Garoppolo was, running for his life a lot of the times in that game. So I'm sticking with the C for the offensive line, and I can't rate him any higher than that, to be honest.
Yeah, C only because Trent is the only one elevating this group at this time. Mike McGlinchey, I don't know what the Niners are going to do to rectify him moving forward. You're talking about a guy you drafted at number 7 overall, and you expect him to be almost as good as Trent Williams. At bare minimum, you expect him to be Joe Staley-esque. And I think that's one of the big reasons the Niners even traded for Trent Williams, because they weren't seeing that Joe Staley upside from Mike McGlinchey. And obviously, there's nothing you can do about him because you can't exactly bench him. He's not going anywhere. He still probably is the best right tackle on the team. But, you talk about guys like Brunskill on the inside too, Lincoln Tomlinson. They're all right pros, but not good enough to be in that B tier, that A tier that we're talking about, an A plus tier. Certainly, I feel like Trent Williams is like an A plus, that he almost elevates the rest of the group, which is a D minus. I think that's kind of how this group kind of fits together when you're actually adding the letter grades of them. Mike McGlinchey, it just feels at this point, we've joked about it after we recorded last week's episode. It's if you had an Xbox controller and you were trying to control Mike McGlinchey, it's almost like the X buttons to throw a holding penalty and the B buttons to allow a sack. That's kind of how it feels like when you watch Mike McGlinchey play. The other right trigger is to call out the media or to flop on the field. I'm sorry. Mike McGlinchey, he is just at this point just feels like a bus at this point. Okay, let's go across the defensive side of the ball for the first time. Let's talk about if we mentioned fullbacks, I'm just going to give Kyle Juszczyk an A plus just so we can round things out. Kyle Juszczyk, you're A plus because you're your own separate category. Now let's go into defensive line. Okay.
I agree, by the way. I agree with the A for Juice. He's been one of the clear positives for this entire Niners team all year. I'll give him an A plus as well.
I just don't even know where to put him. He's like a tight end. He's a running back. He's his own thing. Juice position group, you get an A plus. Okay. Let's talk defensive linemen. Defensive line. So at this point, Nick Bosa came back healthy, 5 sacks on the year. He's looked great. I feel as though we're falling into the same thing we fell into with the offensive linemen, though, where we have one guy who's having an excellent season and the rest, you almost can throw the rest in a can somewhere because, Eric Armstead, I just haven't felt it this year. Javon Kinlaw, D Ford, I guess you could kind of say, is he a defensive line or is he more in the linebacking group? Either way, he's been kind of hit or miss. Kadarius Street, Arden Key, or not Arden Key, Maurice Hurst played a little bit in this last one. I believe got a sack. DJ Jones, I'm going to say C plus. I think this is about a C plus group when you really think about it, because again, Bosa's elevating them. The thing about the defensive line, you would say, is they've been great early in games, but they seem to lose a lot of momentum late in games. They haven't put a game in which I felt like they've just been dominant throughout. And they're falling short of where that 2019 group, whereas that 2019 group, you would say their floor was a B plus and their high end was A plus. This group's floor seems about to be a C and their high end seems to be about maybe a B plus, but right now they're a C plus through the first 5 weeks of the season for me. Jose, where are you at with this defensive line?
Now, if I give the wide receivers a B just because of how good Deebo Samuel has been, I kind of have to give these defensive ends and defensive tackles a B as well, just because of the carrying that Nick Bosa has done for this, not just the defensive line, but probably for the defense in general. The guy is just so relentless, and it's just awesome to see him back on the field after him having to miss mostly all of last year. It was pretty sad to see him go with an ACL injury, but it's cool to see him back. He's been performing very, very well. We need guys like Javon Kinlaw. He came into the season banged up, but still, if you're on the field, we need to see something, right? Like if you're on the field, that means you're healthy enough to play. And if you're healthy enough to play, we need to see that first round potential finally start to flourish. And if we get that combined with the play of Nick Bosa, then this defensive line could, make a lot of noise. And Eric Armstead, brother, we're starting to feel like we made a mistake by keeping you and getting rid of DeForest Buckner, to be honest. So we need him to wake up, but he's a good guy as well. He does a lot of good stuff in the community there in Northern California. So you can't really fault the guy. We just need him to wake up a little bit, get him to, win some of his one-on-one battles. And I think this defensive line could, I think their ceiling is still at an A range for me. I definitely see them causing a lot of problems to opposing offensive line if guys like Javon Kinlaw and Eric Armstead could wake up. But for now, what I've seen for the first few weeks, I'll give them a B.
I just feel as though they're not at A ceiling for me, just because I don't believe in Javon Kinlaw's ability to get at the passer yet. I have not seen him as involved in the pass rush as DeForest Buckner was. And Eric Armstead, I almost feel disappointed more this year than I was last year, because last year I was able to make the excuse for him that Nick Bosa wasn't on the field. And I felt like Nick Bosa generated a lot of the pass rush that Eric Armstead was able to get out there. Does Armstead even have a sack through 5 weeks? I haven't remembered one to this point, and I think that's one of the big things that concerns me. Okay, let's move into the sacking level of this defense. Let's talk about the linebacking group. Obviously, we have a bona fide star up there when it comes to Fred Werner. Besides him, you talk about guys like Azeez Al-Ashar. Drake Greenlaw went down in week 1 with a groin injury. We won't see him back till November. I went with the grades on defensive linemen first. Jose, what's your grade on linebacker?
This is the closest that any position is to an A. So I'm going to give him a B plus. And again, it's probably carried by mostly one guy, and that's Fred Werner. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal the first 5 weeks of the year. He's deserving of every single penny that this organization is paying him. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal. I still have him, rate him probably, if not the best middle linebacker in the entire league. He's easily in top 3 middle linebacker in the entire league. That's a position where, you have to have the brains and you have to have the physical aspect, and the dude just is both, man. And I really love seeing this guy play. Seeing this guy play on the defensive side of the ball is actually so much fun. Al-Shazar has actually been playing really, really well as well. He also helps out that linebacking core. If we could just get Drake Greenlaw to be healthy come November, then this linebacking core is just going to be as good as they were last year and as good as they were in 2019. So they're probably the highest rated position on the entire team. So I'm going to go with the B plus.
I think I'm going to be slightly below you and give them a B. And it's only because, and this can be spoken about the entire defense as a whole, I haven't felt the big play come from them as much. If we do lump D Ford into here, obviously he hasn't been as active on pass rush duty as I would have liked him to be. When you talk about Fred Werner, Fred's, he's all over the field. He is making the tackles and wrapping up, and that's about what you expect from Fred Werner. But I think one of the big things that we elevate Fred Werner in the linebacker discussion for is the fact he's able to come down with that big interception, force that fumble, that strip. And so far to this point in the season, we haven't had any of that. Now, it's a long season. We still have a lot of weeks to go. I'm sure Fred Warner's eventually going to get his, but I feel like the lack of the big play is why this group, while they've been playing well as much as you can when your defensive line has been inconsistent and your defensive backs have been poor, I think that there has been some lost opportunities. I mean, Fred Werner, I hate to do this to him, but obviously he was as much involved in the Devontae Adams getting behind him as anyone else. Used in Fred Warner's best in his A+ performances, he's picking off that ball. So through the first 5 weeks, this is a B group, but I would say, again, you are right in saying this could be the highest graded group amongst this team. They have A upside for the rest of the season. We'll probably revisit this. This has actually been a fun little exercise here. Okay, defensive backs. Do we want to break this down into safeties? Do we want to break this down into cornerbacks, or do we just want to grade this unit as a whole?
I say grade a unit as a whole.
Okay, then grading the unit as a whole. Let's see here. So you went first on the linebackers, correct? Okay. When it comes to the defensive backs, I'm actually going to give somewhat of a shocking rating for them, in the sense that I think this is a lot higher than a lot of people will go on them. I'm going to give them a C-, only because the inconsistencies on injuries, they have been amongst the league leaders and pass interference calls, holding calls. So it just seems like anytime that we get some momentum on defense, it seems like it's derailed by one of these guys making a dumb play down the field. Josh Norman, he's actually been okay this year. He hasn't been as bad of a pickup as I think a lot of people have said he was. Now, the fact that he is a slower veteran has cost him when it's come to those penalty situations, when he's trying to stop guys like Devontae Smith out there. And the fact that he's banged up, I felt like we noticed that when he wasn't on the field for us. Dimondor Lenore, I know a big talk right now is, should he see more playing time? He's had his moments. He's had his rookie moments. Ambry Thomas, where you at, dude? Are you even alive at this point? You get a did not participate or did not incomplete right now on your grade as an individual. But in terms of the position group, I think that you draft a third rounder, that also hurts your cornerback stock, that he's not even out there and contributing. And then, Jason Verrett being out in week 1, that hurt immediately this group. I think this group could have, bare minimum, their peak, I don't think their peak was ever going to be that high, like as a group. I think even at best, they could give you C+ production from the cornerback position. Their worst potential would be, of course, that F grade. But so far through this, I mean, they've done okay. It could have been a lot worse considering all the different factors. And one thing that we should note, they are finally healthy. Sans Verrett, this unit is finally at as full strength as we could ask for. So hopefully going past the bye week here, another week of rest, they're going to come out with a little bit more cohesive of a unit now that we don't even have Verrett valued into the early season game plan of what this position group is. Jose, where are you on our cornerbacks and safeties?
Now,
I didn't even mention Jimmy Ward and, of course.
I'll talk about them.
Yeah.
If we were to do these ratings before that week 5 game in Arizona, I think this would have been close to an F. But I thought they actually played very, very well. The fact that they were able to contain guys like Christian Kirk, contain guys like AJ Green and DeAndre Hopkins, paired all that with the athletic ability and the big play ability of Kyler Murray, and only held him to 17 points. And really the defense was really what kept the Niners in that entire game. And a lot of part of that is Kyler Murray couldn't find guys open. You talked about Josh Norman. I think Josh Norman's pick has been actually surprisingly pretty good. Obviously, he's not going to keep up with some of the speedier guys, but he's physical enough to cause other receivers problems. And that's kind of what you need when you don't have the speed, right? So he's a veteran where he knows what to do enough to where it's not going to be that much of a drop off. Obviously, you mentioned that we are going to get healthier at that position. Jawan Williams, who's actually been one of the healthier guys over the past couple of seasons, unfortunately went down with an injury, but we're expecting to see him back. And once we get him into the rotation, I think the secondary is just going to be not as bad as we've seen. And like in the Seattle game, second half of the Seattle game, everybody was open. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf were really unguardable. But I think I will put them at a D for now, just at a solid D, because the injuries obviously have been immense and it's more than we've wanted to see, obviously, from that position group. But I think it's not an F because of our 2 secondary guys, our 2 safeties. Jimmy Ward and Kosky Tart have actually been playing pretty well, but we expect them to be playing well, right? Like they've been, full-time starters probably for almost 3 seasons now. So those are really the 2 high spots on that secondary that keep it from going to an F, right? So I keep it at a D, and I see their ceiling kind of being around B minus once K'Wan Williams comes back and Josh Norman gets a couple more games in him, and Emmanuel Mosley continues to develop as a cornerback as well. So I think you'll see a little bit better play from the secondary. I'm pretty hopeful after that Arizona performance that we saw this past week that they could play, like that week in and week out. So I'm giving them a D just because of the injuries and because of some of the performances. But I think if we do something similar towards the end of the season like this, I think you'll see this grade going up to at least a B.
Yeah, I just want to see more takeaways at this point. That echoes throughout the entire defense. And I think defensive backs, their ability to pick a quarterback, I think is game changing. And the fact that we haven't seen any of that is something that we immediately have to change. I think our only interception actually has been from linebacker Dre Greenlaw, if you really think about it. So I think that needs to change for this group to start receiving a little bit more respect. Okay, let's talk about special teams as a whole. So this includes returners, kickers, punters. Wishnowsky actually had a good start, but all right, I defer to you on the letter grade for special teams here through the first 5 weeks.
I'm gonna give it a B minus. We haven't seen really anything from the return game, right? And that's usually typical Niners football. Is that we never really have a returner who's ever going to be a scoring threat. So I almost don't even put that into the equation. Robbie Gold going down was absolutely huge. That was huge in the game that he went down against Seattle. I mean, that was such a huge injury, and it continues to be a huge injury. Our punting game has been actually really done really well. I think that's what carries it to a B minus. So I'm going to go B minus just because I don't think they've caused us any games, right? Like if a special teams unit is causing you games, then you kind of put them in the C, D area. But I don't think Robbie Gold's injury is the reason why we lost that game, right? I don't think our inability to, return kicks for big plays is the reason why we're losing games. So I'm going to just give them an average, just B minus. They haven't been terrible. The punting game has been good. And that's about as much as you could really grade on a special teams unit, to be honest.
I disagree. I'm going to give them a D minus. And that the only reason they're not an F for me is Wishnowsky, who actually maybe might bump it up to a D if I'm being honest. But no, this group, I do factor in the returners. I want to see some production from our return game. And the fact that we're having open tryouts between Brandon Nayuk, Travis Benjamin, Trenton Cannon, Mohamed Sanu, fix this. Decide on one guy, and whoever that guy is, do something with the ball once it's in your hands. I think that ignoring that is almost like us just punting on just having a decent return game, which some teams actually do, and it sets them up in great positions. And the fact that we're always battling from negative yardage situations, hell, even the fact that on kickoff returns, we have guys that aren't even returning it to the 25 when they decide to take it out of the end zone. You're putting your team at a net disadvantage just by doing that. And I think that does hurt. And then you mentioned, did it cost us a game against Seattle? Robbie Gold going down with injury. Well, the fact that he's one of the highest paid kickers and he's missing time, that I also grade a little bit stricter on. And, we did lose out on 3 early points. You go up 10-0 against Seattle, that's a different ball game. Poor Wishnowsky actually has to go out there and relieve and field goal duty. And I haven't seen enough Joey Sly to make a full determination on what our place kicker spot is right now at this point. But also factor in here that Robbie Gold wasn't even doing kickoffs. I think that you add in everything together, and this is a very underwhelming defensive unit. And there was, I would say, 2 special teams did cost us against Seattle when you consider that Trenton Cannon had that horrible fumble too. And I think he's still on our team. We didn't cut him because of it. So I think just this group as a whole, I think is a disappointment and not up to par with other NFL teams. And it wouldn't be as noticeable if this team was better. If this team was better, the offense was rolling, the defense was rolling, I think the special teams wouldn't be as much of a play. But the fact is, you do have 3 units on a team, and the special teams isn't necessarily contributing fully on their part. So yes, I'm giving this, I'll bump it up to a D because of Wishnowsky. But yes, I think we are pretty much separate on this one. Before we get into the coaching staff, I guess let's give a just letter grade for the offensive and defensive units as a whole, given our position by position breakdown. So for me, I'll give offense, I'm going to give it a C. I think it's just firmly at that C, C minus actually, because the fact that they've been non-existent in first quarters has been one of the things that has just been horrific through us. They've had moments where they've tried to get us back in the games, but they just keep falling short. They keep committing dumb penalties. C minus for the offense. Defense, I wanted to be a lot critical early on in the season, but I think honestly they're about a B minus now. I think the big thing is just defense in timely moments, timely situational football hasn't been there, but as a unit as a whole, D'Amico Ryans has started to get this unit going a little bit better. So offense C minus, defense B minus for me. Jose?
I'm almost the same. I think offense C minus is where I'll keep them as well. We definitely need to do something to liven up that. It doesn't even matter who the quarterback is at this point. We need to do something outside of the quarterback position to just change things up. Maybe some, I don't know what it's going to have to be, but it's going to have to be something. Hopefully Kyle Shanahan could cook something up during the bye week. So I'll keep them at a C minus as well for the offensive guys. Defense, I'm going to go just a C plus. I haven't seen enough, and you mentioned it, big plays. We haven't seen enough big plays from the defense to really give them for me to push them over that just above average, just about average grading scale for me. So C plus with the ceiling of like an A minus. I think, like you said, D'Amico Ryans is going to start feeling more comfortable after week after week, calling plays for this defense. And I think he's going to start, understanding assignments a little bit more, and he's going to know what to do in certain situations a little bit more than what we've seen the first 5 weeks. So I have him right now at a C plus, but with pretty big potential coming after the bye week.
Yeah, they're more bend but don't break at this moment, but turnovers have a tendency statistically to make a defense go over the top. Like if you start getting turnovers, if a few of those 50-50 balls start turning into interceptions, then suddenly you have an A+ defense. It can happen that quick. You just need to start converting on some of those. Okay, coaching staff. Now, this is going to be one of those highly contested ones. You went first with the special teams there, so I guess I got to go first here with the coaching staff. D+. And I think it's just at this point, we've reached a point, as much as I like Kyle and we've loved Kyle over the last couple of years, you're 5 years in. I got to start seeing you just drop game plans. You can't just keep scapegoating your quarterbacks anymore at this point, whether it's Jimmy or Trey. Whoever's under center needs to have a solid out the gate, come in, engines firing game plan. And I'm not seeing it. And you could blame the offensive line, the penalties and everything, but we're also talking about stuff like Brandon Nayuk and how we're deciding to use him and how we're deciding to use the rest of the wide receiving group. And injuries, I feel, is part of this equation too, because at some point, Kyle, you're a common denominator when it comes to these injuries. How is your team just the most banged up in the league? Does that fall on this defense, the injury prevention coaching staff too? They're part of your coaching staff. You're hiring all these people. So whether it's freak or not, we've seen it over the last 4 years of your coaching regime. So that's all part of the equation. So it's play calling, it's injuries, it's personnel decisions. And all of that has just been off this year. It's just been a very poor performance from someone who's been a head coach long enough to not make excuses for them. You have a record that's, I believe, 8 or 9 games under 500 through your first 5 years as an NFL head coach. And I just think that you're running out of excuses. I think that you will be the head coach up until next year. So I'm not saying this is my fire Shanahan speech, but you need to show us something really big after this bye week. If you don't, one thing you always say about guys like Andy Reid is they almost never lose coming off of a bye week. After this bye week, you need to come out all guns a-blazing. I don't care. And, I'll say this for the rest of the coaching staff too. Like D'Amico Ryans, again, I came out chastising the decisions in the Green Bay game. But, you did a great job, honestly, for the most part, on Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray, two guys that have been just pains in our asses for years. Again, if your defense starts coming down with some of those big plays, you're doing enough to keep the team in games. So I can't be too mad at DeMeco Ryans. I'm just looking at the top, and that is Kyle Shanahan at this point. Jose, your thoughts, your grade, where are you on these guys?
I'm actually not even going to go D plus. I'm just going to go straight D. It's been pretty below average, the play calling, I believe, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And then you mentioned it, how the team gets off to slow starts. We have, some of the worst first quarter performances in the entire league. That all comes down to coaching. If you're not getting your guys fired up, to play the game, then, I mean, what are you doing as a head coach? I know Kyle Shanahan takes care of all the play calling on the offense, but maybe he needs to set that aside for a week or something to just motivate the guys to come out hot one of these weeks. Or I don't know what needs to happen, but something needs to change on that offensive side of the ball. And that's what he gets paid to do, right? He gets paid to make the right adjustments for the team to succeed. And him as a head coach, it needs to happen actually on both sides of the field for him. As far as DeMeco Ryans goes, the Detroit game was kind of disappointing, right? Because they kind of just, left the foot off the pedal there towards the second half. And you don't never want to see that. You never want to see Jared Goff marching down the field for three straight drives on your defense, right? That's never a good thing. So even him, I don't give him as much of a pass as everybody else. I mean, he's been with the team, right, for the past couple of seasons. He was an assistant under Robert Saleh. So he saw what Robert Saleh was able to do the past couple of seasons with that defense. You got to show us a little bit of, some of that stuff. Now, we are starting to see that, right? He's starting to, really call plays that are going to be beneficial for this defense. And I think with the experience of him calling plays for this defense, him kind of teaming up with Fred Werner there, the leader of the defense, I think I'm pretty comfortable that he'll start getting a groove of things and the play calling will be a little bit better. But I think it's just a straight D for me. They have to do a better job of, motivating the guys. That's their job. If the team is coming out flat every single week, that falls on the coaches 100%. And we need, going into this Indianapolis game, we need to see some fire in that team, something different, something where they get off to a big start. If not, then yeah, we got to keep on continuing to question this coaching staff.
All right, Jose, final question here. Final 49ers team grade overall.
C minus. Your record is 2-3. What do all good coaches say? You're as good as what your record is. If you're losing more games than you're winning, then I can't put you at an above average grade, right? So I'm going to go C minus with a ceiling of about a B. So C minus from what we've seen the first 5 weeks. Can't give you anything bigger than that when you're sitting at 2-3, unfortunately.
And if I consider being at 500 passing, that's why I have to give this team a D plus. In fact, if you check out at Slumpbuster Podcast on IG, you'll see my power rankings. On there, I have them as 20, and I wanted to put them below the Bears, who are 3-2 at 21. That's how bad this kind of like first few weeks have been, because you are what your record are. If you're worse than the Bears, then I almost wanted to put you worse than the Bears. The only thing that I'm giving you credit for is the fact that you held a Seattle team that at one point was a top 10 team to a 1-score game, that you were within 1 score of the team that's potentially the first or second best team in the league, Arizona. The fact that you were within 37 seconds of beating a team that's at least a top 7 or 8 team. But at this point, your only 2 wins have been against 2 bottom 5 teams, the Lions and the Eagles. So, that culmination of factors, I can't give you anything more than a D, but you have been in games with good teams that are A+ teams. So I guess I by that virtue, I settle on D+ for the 2021 San Francisco 49ers through the first 5 weeks. All right, faithful, what are your letter grades? Comment below some player names. I want to know if you want to give some individual player grades and assessments, and we'll go through them one by one with you. Of course, keep liking this video because, of course, it helps us in the algorithm, guys. We want to talk more Niners football. We want to talk more to you, the Niners faithful. So subscribe to our channel. Juju Talk Sports, Jose Corral, go Niners. We'll see you next time.